Hey guys, welcome back to The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel for the video today. We're going to have a comprehensive discussion, guys, on when and when you don't want to use braided line on your fishing reels. I think personally, from my observation, a lot of people use braided line way too much when they shouldn't be. Some people don't use braided line in situations where they need to be using braid. So I'm going to give you guys sort of a good little tutorial on when I like to use braided line. Dang flies here, guys. Anytime I see a fly here, we got the chicken coops right outside of my tackle room, so anytime I see a fly, I got to get it because it's driving me nuts. But anyway, guys, I think a lot of people don't know the best time to use braided line, so we're going to dig into that in the video today. And also, guys, I will put the braid that I use, which is the Seaguar Smackdown braid, in my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video. You guys can get you a spool of that braid by using my link in the description here. It's got this stealth gray color here, which is what I really like. It's hard to see in the water. And also, guys, you see the reel that I got the braid on here. This is the Cast King MGTI bait cast reel. They're top of the line reel, built for stout, guys. 11 ball bearings. It's got a freaking great braking system and magnetic spool control on it. I'll have the Cast King link in the description of the video here. And also, if you use the promo code Randy10, you get an additional discount on it. You guys will really like this reel. It's at a great price also on there. Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about the braid that we're going to be using here on both spinning and bait casting. It's sort of like a comprehensive thing. Here's the thing about braid. It's like, before you decide when you want to use it, you got to understand the characteristics of braid over monofilament and fluorocarbon before you make your determination. There's two factors that stand out about everything else in braided fishing line. Number one is it doesn't have any stretch whatsoever, which can be a positive or a negative based upon the technique you're fishing, and it is more visible. Even, you know, the low visibility gray like, you know, Seaguar has here, it's still more visible than a clear fluorocarbon or monofilament. So that's another factor to it. So you have to make that determination based upon the technique. So the technique that you're fishing is totally indicative of when you don't want to use it, along with the cover that you're fishing. So here's my times that I use it. I'm going to talk about when I use braided line and when I don't use a braided line. I use braided line very sparingly. Most of my bass fishing, probably, I'm going to say 85% of my fishing is with fluorocarbon fishing line, and about maybe 10% of my fishing is with braided line, and maybe 5% with monofilament. You know, monofilament primarily just for topwater lures. Fluorocarbon is the workhorse for about everything that I do here. Thing fly. And then the braided line, for me, it's going to be limited to like punching, you know, like punching a heavy weight in matted vegetation, sometimes flipping and pitching in extremely thick cover, which is a very limited scenario. And then it's got some limited use for me with topwater lures like frogs, buzz toads, that type of stuff, when I don't want any stretch at all there. So throughout the course of the year, just based upon where I'm fishing at, it can be more or less than 10%. If I'm doing a lot of fishing like in Florida, where I'm pitching mats and flipping matted vegetation, I use braid quite a bit there. You know, if I'm frog fishing, say for example, I'm frog fishing up north in the Mississippi River and I got a frog over matted grass or something like that, I'll use braided line. But other than that, I don't use it as much as a lot of people do. A lot of people will take braided line and they pitch it and flip it in about anything. Prime example is Greg Hackney. Greg Hackney is, I highly respect him as a pitcher and flipper, but he uses braided line a lot more than what I ever would in different situations. It works for him, but I simply have more confidence in fluorocarbon in those more open water areas, simply because of the visibility factor. So therefore, if I'm pitching and flipping most cover, like dock pilings or lay down trees or something like that, I've got fluorocarbon and not braided line in there. So that's the bait casting applications. Now the spinning applications, we're going to dig into this a little bit here because I don't want to get into this whole braid to fluorocarbon debate, but I do not use braid to fluorocarbon setup with a knot. You know, that I just don't do it because number one is I think there's more advantages to using straight fluorocarbon over braid to fluorocarbon. That's for another video. We've done stuff like this before. But what I will say with that is that the only time that I do use braid and fluorocarbon on a spinning outfit is if I'm fishing like a fluke or a floating worm sometimes. And then sometimes I'll take like 20-pound test braided line and I'll put it on a barrel swivel, and then maybe like a 3-foot fluorocarbon leader off of that barrel swivel to fish like a floating worm or fluke, simply because I can make longer casts with that light braided line, and the barrel swivel, you know, allows me to fish it without twisting the line a lot. But I only do that is if I'm fishing that floating worm or that fluke right on the surface. If I'm letting it fall down, for example, say if I'm in a clear water situation where I want to let that fluke sink 2 or 3 feet under the water, or if I got my floating worm, I want to let it sink that far down, I never use the braid to fluorocarbon. I always use straight fluorocarbon because of the visibility factor. Now, here's my perception on the thing, or some of the reasons or some of the things that I go by with that, is I think bass are a lot more aware than people give them credit. And I think there's a lot of things that can detract or take away strikes. And the visibility of braided line in certain situations can. Now, let me talk about one prime scenario where people use braid to fluorocarbon setup. Like a lot of people, if they're drop shotting or fishing finesse tactics for big smallmouth up in those Great Lakes, you always see the guys using the braid to fluorocarbon, and they, you know, you're peeling that line with it and that type of stuff. The braid to fluorocarbon, or the braided line in general, is going to help you generate 0 more strikes. 0. It's like, this is the reality of it. Fluorocarbon line will help you get more bites because it's invisible. Braided line will add up to 0 more strikes. In fact, it'll take away, in my opinion, because let's say you're fishing a clear water environment where the water visibility is 7 or 8 foot clarity. Now, a lot of guys use that yellow braided line, and then they'll put maybe a 10-foot leader on something like that. If you make a cast into 20 or 30 foot of water, and you've got 20 foot of yellow braided line coming down in the water, and you still have your leader. Now, I'm not saying it does it all the time, but I can guarantee the smallmouth can see that yellow line in the water, and it may or may not affect some of them from biting. It's going to get you 0 more bites there. So a lot of people say, well, Randy, you don't know what you're talking about, because the Elite Series guys, they catch 20-pound bags of smallmouth every day on braid to fluorocarbon. My rebuttal to that is if they use straight fluorocarbon, they probably catch 22 pounds, because I think that there are some fish that pick up on that and are a little bit skittish. And that's the same if you pitch and flip with braided line in a little bit more open water areas. Not so much with top water like the frogs, but in that scenario. Now, another factor you have to consider with braided line is the no stretch, the no stretch factor. And this is why this is one of the biggest limitations of braided line, because there's a lot of techniques that you want stretch. And I want a little bit of line stretch in about anything that I do, except for like that frog fishing on top or the matted vegetation. That's why people don't really fish with braided line on crankbait, because you need that little flex or that little bit of stretch in the line to let that fish inhale that bait a little bit deeper. So you don't ever want to use braided line on any reaction baits. Don't use braided line on like crankbaits or jerk baits or spinner baits or chatter baits or anything like that. Some people do. It's not helping them out at all. It's not adding to any more fish in the boat for them, because you do need that stretch at certain times. So if you're losing fish a lot of times with braided line, that's because you're tearing their mouth. And what happens a lot of times is when you set the hook with braided line, if you happen to get the hook in like the fleshy part of the mouth here, it's very easy to rip a hole in that fleshy part, and then the fish jumps and it'll throw your lure out with that. So my recommendation with braided line, guys, is use it very sparingly. Use it for pitching and flipping, punching mats, flipping and pitching extremely heavy cover in dirty water, or some type of topwater baits like a frog or horny toad or something like that. Other than that, I think you'll do better off using straight fluorocarbon. And also, guys, in that Seaguar line, check out this Carbon Ultra, guys. This is their new fluorocarbon line called Carbon Ultra. Absolutely awesome. You guys will love this stuff too. So hope it helps you guys out. We'll talk later.